So you're looking to start a podcast, but you're not sure where to begin? I've got 5 helpful things that I've learned since I started my podcast. Let's talk about that. I started podcasting a little over 2 years ago, and I've learned a lot about podcasting since. So I wanted to share 5 things I've learned since I've started. But first, if this is our first time together, my name is Jonathan, also known as Dagan07, and I've been podcasting with my buddy Nick, who goes by Wild Twins Fan, since about June of 2020. We both started with 0 experience and have grown a decent listenership in the past 2 years. So if you're looking to start a podcast, this video is for you. Let's dive right in. So the first and biggest thing that I've learned is consistency is key. What this does is it gives your audience the confidence and the ability to know when you're going to release your next episode, whether it's a video podcast, an audio podcast, or both. Here at A Gaming Moment, which you can find at agamingmoment.com, which is my podcast, we release on a weekly cadence. Now, we release generally every Tuesday. Sometimes our schedules don't permit for that, but we try to be as consistent as possible because, again, consistency is key. We saw that releasing every Tuesday at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern time yielded the best results for our first 24 hours of the podcast being live. We went from having 3 to 4 listeners to about 12 to 15 listeners every week within that first 24-hour period. And we tested every single day for the first 3 to 5 episodes that we put out. So having a good consistency is pretty much one of the biggest keys to growing your podcast and your listenership. The second thing that I've learned since starting my podcast is you don't need a fancy audio setup to sound good. You don't need like a Shure SM7B, which is a $400 microphone. You don't need an expensive blue microphone to sound really well on your podcast. For my podcast, I use this $60 microphone that I picked up off Amazon. My co-host, Wild Twins Fan, was using a Blue Yeti microphone for the last 2 years. He recently just upgraded to a Shure SM7B. But again, when you're starting out, you don't need that fancy, expensive equipment to get started. You also don't need any fancy audio interfaces for your podcast. We don't use anything like a Rodecaster Pro or a TC Helicon Go XLR. We don't use those for our podcast because we don't need them. What I use personally is I use Voicemeeter Potato, which there's a card that's going to be somewhere on one of these sides in the corner. I've created a video on how to set that up. It's a free software for Windows. You can do everything that you need to do in there to really sweeten up your audio. And then the rest is done in post by taking out background noise, things like that. You don't need any fancy audio equipment to sound good. You can listen to our podcast, you can listen to what it sounds like, and you can tell that in some instances, yes, you can tell that we're not using any fancy audio equipment, but 95% of the time, and that's just because we record from different areas, one of us might be out of town and we might be recording from our laptop, and we have a travel microphone that we use, but you can tell that the environment that we're in is a little bit different because there's a little bit of extra echo, but it's very, very rare. So again, you don't need fancy audio equipment to sound good. It revolves around your settings and it revolves around how you edit. And coming up in one of the next things that I've learned, you'll see that there's hosting services that have tools that you can utilize to help your audio sound sweeter without you having to do any work. But stay tuned for that one. The third thing that I've learned since starting my podcast is you have to find your structure. Do you want to be a scripted podcast where you write everything down that you're going to say and you basically read it off of a script? Or do you want to have an unscripted podcast where everything is just kind of off the top of your head? You're answering questions. Is it more like a live Q&A? Are you going back and forth with a co-host or with a guest? Versus the scripted, you're again literally writing everything out and you're reading it kind of as is. And some people can get away with that. Some type of podcast can get away with that. But for us, we kind of have a combination of the both. We have some parts of our outlines that are scripted, like our intros, our outros, our live reads, things like that. But then we have the unscripted part, which is we basically just have bullet points that we want to talk about particular topics. That format works really well for us because we can say, okay, we need to make sure we hit this, and this for this topic versus scripting it all out. Because for us, scripting it, 100% takes a lot of time, and it really just depends on the amount of time, but it also really depends on the type of podcast that you're trying to put out. I've seen podcasts where it's really kind of like an RPG style podcast where people have these roles and they're kind of like a soap opera, if you will. But you have things like Joe Rogan that he has a guest pretty much every single episode, and he's just kind of having banter with that guest back and forth. And Joe makes sure that he has questions lined up for the guest, and that's about as scripted as it gets. He just makes sure that the questions are there and the questions get answered, and then it's mostly organic from there. The fourth thing I've learned since starting a podcast, and this is a very, very important one, is to just be you. Don't try to be a different version of you. You can't fake charisma at the end of the day. If you don't have charisma or you don't have that type of personality, don't try to fake that. And the reason being is people can smell that. People can sense it. People can hear it in your voice if you're being fake. Just be genuine. Be the best person of you. There's people out there that want to relate with you, that want to correlate with you, that they let your personality shine. A podcast, whether it's video or audio, is the perfect place to just let your personality shine. Put your expertise out there if it's that kind of a podcast. Put your fantasies out there if it's that kind of a podcast. Just be yourself. That is the biggest thing with any podcast, is people want to listen because they want to get to know you, or they relate with you, and they have the same feelings as you, or they have the same interests as you. And that's one of the biggest key things of growing is just be you. And the fifth thing that I've learned since starting a podcast is podcasting is a ton of work. There's so much that goes into it. There's scripting, research, recording, editing, and hosting. A lot of people don't even think about, okay, where am I going to host this podcast? Where's the audio for this podcast going to live? So for a gaming moment, we use Buzzsprout to host all of our podcast episodes. They have an amazing add-on called Magic Mastering, which makes the podcast sound so much better after editing. It's great for putting those finishing touches and a bow on top. It gives us a great holistic view of how we're doing as far as analytics go, and it submits all the episodes to all the major podcasting platforms, as well as some other not so well-known ones, to ensure they maximize your reach. You also get a decent looking landing page like ours that you can see at podcast.agamingmoment.com. They've also been a great partner to us, as they're just as passionate about helping you to grow. If you're interested in giving Buzzsprout a chance, I have a link in the description that lets Buzzsprout know I sent you. They will give you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and it helps a gaming moment. And then after you have your podcast hosted, it's up, it's live, now you have to figure out a way to market it. Are you going to go through social media? What social medias are you going to use? Are you going to use Instagram? Are you going to use TikTok? Are you going to use YouTube Shorts? Are you going to use Facebook, LinkedIn? It all depends on the type of podcast that you run. And then guess what? If you're running a weekly podcast, now you have to start that whole process all over, from research to scripting to editing, marketing, everything. It's a vicious cycle. It's a monotonous cycle, but it's so rewarding when you hear from listeners or from your audience in general that you have made a difference in their life. For a gaming moment, we've helped people decide on what games they want to choose. We've helped people decide whether they're going to stream on Twitch or whether they're going to stream on YouTube. We've helped people decide what games they're going to play, what equipment that they're going to buy for their streaming or gaming setup. That really allows us to know that we are providing some kind of good service for our audience. And that's what I encourage you to do, is figure out how you can provide a good service other than great audio and an entertaining show. What other things can you do for your audience to get them engaged with your podcast and to give them a reason to keep coming back and listening? If you've made it this far in the video and you're finding value, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Helps me out a lot and helps others like yourself find this video. And since you've made it this far in the video, I've got a couple bonus items that I've learned pretty much here recently to help make your podcasting life a little bit better. One of the things is find efficiencies. So for me, doing the podcast thumbnails, because each one of our podcasts has its own individual thumbnail, I use Photoshop, and within Photoshop, I have what's called artboards, and I have 3 artboards on one page, which basically allows me to create a podcast cover, which is a specific size for Buzzsprout. And then I have a thumbnail for Facebook, and I have a thumbnail for YouTube. And within that, I only have to make the image once. It copies all the way through the artboards, and I can export all 3 of those artboards out, and I have all the images in one export. And now I can use them on the social media platforms that we use to push out content. And finally, my last bonus tip that I can give you is live stream to YouTube. I know it's extra work. I know it's daunting. You know, you can pretty much easily set up a YouTube channel easily with OBS, and leave a comment down in the comment section if you want me to go through how to set up a proper YouTube live stream and the tools that we use to set up our YouTube live stream. But the reason for this is YouTube recently announced that they're going to start sending bigger signals for podcast channels. And they've recently released a youtube.com/podcast page where it lists a lot of the top podcasts, and it gives you an opportunity to show up on that page and continue to grow your audience, which this could be huge. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making it all the way through. Again, if you found the video useful, please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. Links to everything are down in the description below. All links are affiliate links. Any link that you do click really does help out the channel, helps me out a lot, and I appreciate you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.